Hey, good morning, everybody. Mark Westcott here, and today my very special guest is Herbie Rosenberg. Hey, how are you, Herbie?
I'm well, thank you for having me. Good to be here.
I was actually going to start with Herbivore or Herbalicious or all those names, all those other names that you have, but I didn't know
Plenty.
which one to use.
Well,
Herbicide.
I have many nicknames. Well, and I answer to any of them. And on that note, good morning and cheers.
Yes, yes. Cheers. Here's to our cup of tea and to our scones. Actually, scones aren't
Yeah, well, I
our
didn't
food
get
of
any
choice on
scones.
the plane.
I didn't get any scones, so I managed to get some shortbread this morning, but that
Very
should
good.
do.
Well, that's because you can't go down to the shop and buy scones in
Well,
Victoria, Herbie. That's what
exactly,
it
exactly.
is. Hey, look, let's start off today. It's all about Monday motivation, positivity, mindfulness, and all those sorts of things. So let's start with all the positive stuff. Herb, tell me about. Now, you've obviously got a good Australian accent, so let's talk about how long you've lived out here. Where you came from in South Africa, where you came from, and why and how long ago you moved out here to Australia?
Well, you can hear obviously my South African accent. I've been in Australia for 10 years, and the reason we came here is not for any other reason than we wanted to be with our family. Both my daughters and their husbands were here, had good jobs. They've started producing grandchildren, and we didn't want our grandchildren to think of us as living in the computer. We wanted to be part of their lives, and we made a decision to come and live in Australia just to be with them. That was just on 10 years ago, and we have never regretted it. I'm very fortunate in that through my business, which we'll talk about in a moment, I've been able to get back to Africa many times. In fact, in the 10 years, I've probably been back 25 times, if not more. So, in fact, I sort of like got one foot on each continent. So I have my Australian business and I have my African business, and the two
Yeah,
merge beautifully. So I'm very lucky.
absolutely, absolutely. But so it was actually family that brought you out here in the first
Yes,
instance. It
yes,
wasn't so you could
indeed.
cheer for the Wallabies or anything like that over
Uh,
the spring.
well, we didn't leave South Africa for any other reason than family, and our lifestyle in South Africa was brilliant. I've been in the safari industry for many years. We can talk about that, and I'll tell you in a moment as to how that safari experience merged into what I do here in Australia.
So Herb, let's talk about your history in South Africa. You've been, I've seen photos of you with long, dark, curly hair. So you've obviously been around in South Africa. That photo was taken. I haven't seen you with long, dark, curly hair in Australia. So.
It's not going to happen again.
But let's talk about what brought you into the travel industry in the first place in South Africa, Herb.
Well, it goes back 40 years, and that the company that I was working for um, bought a private game lodge, and I was offered the opportunity to get involved in the game lodge and do the marketing for it. Now, I knew nothing about the travel industry at that point in time, but the whole idea of a private game lodge really turned me on. So I said yes, and I've thrown in the deep end and learned about the travel industry very rapidly. And over the years, we took that private game lodge, which at the time was virtually bankrupt, and we took it to being one of the top private game lodges on the planet. And through and to do that, I had to travel extensively. I was overseas all around the world, including Australia, three, four, maybe five times a year to every corner of the world. And through that opportunity, I developed a huge amount of international connections and contacts. So my network grew exponentially.
Fantastic. So that was the beginnings of what you're doing now. And I just want to throw in too, you're also a pilot, Herb, aren't you? We're going to come back to the travel business, but tell me, you used to fly planes over in South Africa.
Well, let's say that I used to be a pilot. It's a long time ago. At one stage in the early stages of my life, I lived in Zambia, and I met some very influential, wonderful people who introduced me to the flying club and suggested that I learn how to fly aeroplanes. And of course, I've always loved aeroplanes. And I took my private pilot's license in a town called Lusaka in Zambia. It fell under the British civil aviation rules. And I flew for many, many years as a bush pilot. We went into the most amazing bush strips, and it was one of the most exciting, wonderful times of my life. Ever since then, I've had an absolute passion for aeroplanes. So being introduced to the Royal Flying Doctor Services air race and then meeting you was like, what can I say? It's like the cherry on the top. It's been the most wonderful. I was very, very fortunate.
Yeah, we've had some great trips, and we'll come to that in a minute. But let's keep talking about what you were doing in South Africa, and then when you came to Australia, was that sort of preempted that you were going to run African reps? I think you call your business now. So how did that transition from the move to Australia to what you're doing now? You're over here.
Okay, so I was, as I said, I was working for a private game lodge in South Africa. And then when we decided to, at the time we called it relocate, because we weren't very sure about immigration, but we were going to relocate to Australia. And I mentioned it to the local travel news who published it. And the next day I had a call from somebody who said, I hear you're going to live in Australia. My company needs marketing in Australia. Would you be able to help us? So come and have a cup of coffee, which I did. And that was the beginning of it. You know, I said, well, absolutely, let's do some marketing. Because in fact, when we decided to come to Australia, I had no idea what I was going to do here. And that was, it literally fell into my lap. And I registered the name of the company, Africa Reps, and started doing a little bit of networking in South Africa before we actually moved. And then in December 2009, we landed here in Melbourne, started my business on the 1st of January 2010. And it's been really very, very positive all the way until, of course, COVID-19 hit us in March, which we can talk about as well. But it's been an amazingly wonderful ride.
Yeah, no, you've obviously done some great things since you've been over here too, Herbie. You said before, you continually going back. You're in the great spot of one of those people who gets to go and see all these. They actually pay you and fly you over to go and check out their wonderful lodges and their wonderful experiences, just so you can come back and promote it.
Well, the point is that part of the contractual deal is that they have to show me the product, because how can, it's all very well looking at pictures, but until you've actually experienced a private game lodge or a hotel or a product in Africa, it's very, very hard to promote it. And first-hand experience, and in fact, when I always make a point of having a photograph taken of myself in the situation in situ. So when I do my PowerPoint presentations, I always throw in a little picture of myself. Is it arrogance? Yeah, maybe not. But anyway, just proves that I've actually been there, that I know what I'm talking about. And so that's what I do.
So Herbie, tell me, in Australia at the moment, so let's for a moment forget COVID and the fact that no one's traveling and business has come to a standstill. Is there anyone in Australia that knows more about African travel than Herbie Rosenberg?
You can't ask me that question.
Well, I'm going to. You're allowed to tell your truth.
To respond to that question is a tad of arrogance, and I think
tell the truth, Herb. Just tell the truth.
There are other people that know as much as I do. Let's put it that way. Of course, I'm very focused on the products I represent. I, in fact, looked after 9 companies in 9 African countries, that is Southern and East Africa, and probably got more, I've never really counted, but I've probably got over 100 different products and properties in those 9 countries that I look after. So it does require a fair amount of keeping up to date, because there's continuous changes and upgrades and rebuilds and new ideas and whatever, and even new camps get built. So in fact, I was scheduled to visit Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Zambia in May this year, but of course that was put on hold. So I'll have to pick up the pieces hopefully in 2021. And in fact, this is going to be the first year in the 10 years that I've been in Australia that I actually haven't been back to Africa. So yeah, there's a void.
No, look, you're not the only one, Herb. So yes, it's,
I know.
It's a very, very different year. And so last week, of course, we had Julie McIntosh on here, and Julie is the travel agent who packages all these sorts of trips together. But you're sort of the person who then presents to Julie the options as to what people can do over in Africa, and then she's the person that talks to the humans, so to speak, that want to come in and book travel. So you're not a travel agent as such. You represent a number of lodges and trains and planes and automobiles and so on, and you spend a lot of your time when you're working here going around and speaking to travel agents, don't you, and talking about the product effectively that your principals, I think you call them, are offering, and to convince the travel agents then to, or not convince them, but to make them aware of what's available for customers who for what customers want to go and see. Is that kind of how it works?
Precisely. And in fact, you know, when
Hi to Julie, who may well be watching, I think, today.
Hello, Julie. So when Julie's company, the Classic Safari Company, was approached to participate and sponsor a raffle in I think it was the 2015 air race, Royal Flying Doctor Services air race, she approached me and said, would I be able to assist her in putting together a prize? And because of the very high profile, the target market that the Flying Doctor Services race portrayed, I was able to get a significant prize. I think it was worth $25,000 worth of African safari prizes, and it made it very, very valuable. And as a result of that, we were able to generate significant funds for Royal Flying Doctors.
Yeah.
So it was a great joint effort between Julie and myself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about that last week. And of course, we first met Herbie on the 2015 Outback Air Race, for which Facebook reminds me every day that about that trip, which is great. We get to relive it. We get to see all the photos come up, 5 years ago. This is what you were doing. And there's great memories of our trip. But we only had 3 people in our plane. We had a spare spot, and I think the organisers were looking to see if they could put you in a plane, weren't they, to come around and do the race?
Yes, and for 2 weeks, I was praying that I would be able to get on. In fact, I just thought I'd maybe participate in one leg of the I don't know, 20 odd legs of the race. And then one day I got a call from a gentleman called Mark Westcott. He said, I've got a spare seat. Would you like to take it? I don't think it took me 30 seconds to, not even that, to say yes. But then this Mr. Westcott said, well, I got to meet you first to see if we're compatible. So he flew down to Melbourne to check me out.
Right.
And at the same time, out, and we were actually satisfied with each other, and we haven't looked back since.
Well, we've travelled together every year on plane trips since then, haven't we? We've done our own little safaris in between the Outback Air races, so it's been a great time. But what are the, when you think about, Herbie, the trips that we've been on, now you're a South African who's now living in Australia, and you know South Africa backwards. And so tell me why it's been a great thing for you to come on the trips that we've done each year.
Well, first of
Tell me
all,
what.
I love exploring. I'm very, very into nature conservation, and learning about my new country has been a big target for me, and the ability to see the country. Over how many trips have we done together now? I think 5 or 6 trips we've done together. I reckon I've seen more of Australia than 99% of all Australians, and that has given me a huge amount of knowledge of what Australia has to offer, and it's, for me, that's been absolutely wonderful. And also the ability to compare Africa with Australia. There are similarities, but there are also some significant differences. I'm a lover of arid countryside, so the fact that we've been able to go out across the outback has for me been absolutely fantastic, perfect, exactly what I wanted. And in fact, in South Africa, my wife and I would frequently go and spend our summer holidays in the arid central part of South Africa called the Karoo, where most of our friends thought we were absolutely not normal to do that. But that's what we did. We enjoy it.
Absolutely. And how is Robin? Is she there in the background today?
She's here, but she will not come into the room where I'm talking.
Oh, that's good. Well, please pass my love.
The problem is that she hasn't been able to see a hairdresser for quite a few weeks, so that's become a bit of an issue.
I totally understand. I get that. So speaking of the air race and all things travel around Australia, yes, we've had some great trips, and we've seen pretty much we've seen every state in Australia apart from Tasmania, haven't we, in the plane, Herbie? So you've been right around Queensland up through Torres Strait, Thursday Island, and so on, right up to Adele's Grove, so Longreach and so on. We've been through the Northern Territory together over to Western Australia, both from the north and up from the south. We've done the wineries in South Australia, and certainly Flinders Ranges has been a regular.
It's one of my favourites. Loved that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I was going to, and remember the first time, with Tom, Sarah, you and I, and we did the Great Australian Bite, and right across the bottom of Australia. I'm going to ask you what has been your favourite, or maybe what are the 3 favourite spots you've visited in Australia while during the travels that we've been on?
Okay, I would say definitely the Great Australian Bite, and landing on the Nullarbor Plains. Maybe
Hotel, there was a landing strip. No, actually, we landed on the road. We had to land on the road that day.
Yeah, I mean that was extraordinary. Gosh, there's so many things. I would say Adele's Grove, where we swam with the freshwater crocodiles. Everybody said to me, "It's fine. They don't eat people," so I believed them. And I would say that the highlight was Karanjini Gorge in the Western Australia outback, where we had some phenomenal climbs down into those gorges, swimming in those icy rivers at the bottom of the gorge. I mean,
yes.
And I could go on and on, but you said 3, and there's 3 highlights.
Okay. No, I think I agree with you, and I'd add the 4th one would probably be Arkaroola. We've always had great trips to Arkaroola, and always had a good time.
Was it called
especially that road trip? What is it? The ridge top trip on the back of the Toyota. Yes, everyone needs to do that at least once. I've done it 3 times, and I'm not doing it again. That's enough. Okay. Now, Herbie, we've talked about fun things, we've talked about great times, and we've got the Outback Air Races coming up again next year. So I hope you and Julie get together and get some sponsorship going for a prize again for to raise funds for the Royal Flying Doctor. I think last time, which was 2 years ago now, over $500,000 was raised, 600,000 was raised for Royal Flying Doctor off the back of the Outback Air Race. So I know you've locked in. We've just got to find a couple more people to come with us next year, and we're all go. So if anyone's watching, listening, send me a note if you're half interested in coming on the Outback Air Race. But also let's talk about just before we get on to business again, Herbie. I want to talk about your grandkids. I want to hear how special your grandkids are.
Well, that's asking a grandfather that question is dangerous, because.
So tell me about cricket, Herbie. Tell me about cricket.
Well, my two eldest grandsons are cricket fanatics, love it, have done extremely well, have played for the state, and have done extraordinarily well. Of course, now COVID has put everything on hold. So they've done extremely well in cricket. But then, so I've got 5 grandchildren, 2 from one family and 3 from the other family, and so their ages range from the oldest one being 15 now to the youngest being 7. Each and every one of them as phenomenal as the next, completely different characters. It's amazing. 1 granddaughter, 4 grandsons, and I'm totally, as well as my wife, of course, we are totally head over heels in love with all of them. And they give us endless joy and happiness. And I think the saddest thing about COVID at the moment is that we can't see them. And we just can't wait for this lockdown. We're exactly halfway today. Hopefully we'll be free on the 13th of September, and we'll be able to see them and hug them again. That's been the big downside for us.
That's right. You live in Vicdanistan. Is that where your state's been renamed? Vicdanistan.
They call it the state of disaster.
State of disaster. Well, I feel for all you guys in Victoria, Herbie, because that's no fun. We all went through that at the start of COVID in regard to locking ourselves in our rooms and not visiting parents, grandparents, and grandchildren and so on. But obviously it's you guys are certainly locked up down there. But look, I also mentioned before we started, Herbie, I love the giraffe in the background there, and the South African Airways jet you've got behind your head there. So you're always promoting, aren't you? She's always pushing it out there, which I think is fantastic. Now,
carry on.
Oh, I was just going to say, Herbie, look, COVID's been tough on everyone. We've all had to change the way we do business and so on. I'm not going to talk about myself here. Certainly, there's been plenty of changes in my business, but in your business, Herbie, and in Julie's, who we spoke to last week, and everyone in the travel business, I mean, there's actually nothing you can do about it. Nobody can travel, so all the firms, companies that you represent, and so on. I mean, there's just nobody can go anywhere. No one can do anything, and so on. And I think I mentioned last week that the things that are selling these days are jet skis and things like that, where instead of people being overseas, they're looking at how can they have a holiday in their own backyard. Now your business obviously has come to a grinding halt, and what do you see in regard to how, because we're talking here about how do people sort of still jump out of bed in the morning and be positive and look towards the future. What are you doing, Herbie, to make sure that you keep good mindset and good mental attitude in regard to your business? What's your secret?
It's certainly tough times in the travel industry, being the first to have been affected and probably going to be the last to come right. Just because even when they open the borders and Qantas and Virgin starts flying again, there's a lag between getting a booking and it happening. It's probably 6 months before the travel industry can even start to see some revenue. From my perspective, representing companies in Africa, I mean, none of the companies I represent are getting any business whatsoever at the moment. Yet, each and every one of them has, even though some of them are not paying me at all because they just haven't got the funds to do so, none of them have broken contracts. And in fact, all 9 companies, we're still working together, even though for some of them, I'm doing it pro bono at the moment, with the objective that when things do come right, and of course they will come right, it's just a matter of time, that there is still some momentum that we can ride on. In the meantime, I make sure that I'm in touch with every one of my clients. That's all the travel agents in Australia, New Zealand, all the wholesalers that package Africa. I'm in touch with them constantly. And of course, I'm also in touch with all my principals in Africa on a regular basis, bearing in mind that with the time difference, I'm very fortunate that I have 2 days every day. I have my Australian day, which is basically 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock. Then I have my Africa day, which is basically 5 o'clock till probably 10 o'clock at night. So from a productivity point of view, that's very, very good. So there's a lot to do. Bookings are slowly but surely starting to happen now for end of 2021, 2022, but certainly very far and few between at this point in time. And we're just hoping that when COVID has been overcome, that our government will open the borders and hopefully the airlines will start flying internationally again, as many are out of Europe and America, and that Africa will once again, sooner than later, hopefully sooner than later, be back on the radar. So
absolutely, and maybe Herbie, there's maybe there's some opportunities in Australia for you as well with some of the lodges and so on. I mean, maybe that's your opportunity is to look at other options in Australia, because I would assume that travel within Australia is going to come back before international travel comes back. So
yeah,
maybe there's some, and maybe you'll have to get me to fly you out to these places to have a look at them.
Well, that's opportunistic. I like it. Yes, one of my principals and I are actually looking at doing domestic travel. Initially domestic travel here in Australia, but then also ultimately inbound from other countries into Australia, so that essentially I don't have all my eggs in one basket. At this stage, all my eggs are in the African basket.
Yes.
There are upsides and there's downsides to that, but
well, that's why I tried to get you to tell the world that you're the best and most knowledgeable guy in Australia in regard to the African market, Herb. But you were too modest. That's what happened. Hey, look, Herb, it's been great talking with you today. We could go on for ages and ages and hours and hours. In fact, if anyone well, absolutely, and if anyone had asked us any questions in the comments box, we probably would have kept going. But look, Herb, thanks for your time today. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you, and we've been fortunate in sharing some great experiences, the meeting through the Outback Air Race, and looking forward to the 2021 Outback Air Race as well. And if anyone wants information in regard to that, please just let us know, send me a note or something, and I'll get some information to you. But it's a great cause. It's raising money for the Royal Flying Doctors, and there's a great sense of adventure as you travel around and see more of the country than, as Herbie said, probably 99.9% of the Australian population has. So thanks, Herb. And just before we go, I just want to shout out for my guests next week. Some of you who follow on Facebook might have seen me promoting sending some posts up in regard to the Four Daughters beef producers out near St George. And so we've got Bonnie and Molly Penfold coming onto the show, coming into the conversation next week, and we're going to talk about all things beef production and the beef boxes they put together, and And they also have been struck by COVID. They had huge contracts in China, which obviously stopped overnight, and so on. So looking forward to chatting to them. And I've just spent the last couple of days out there because I wasn't able to get home in the plane. So I've spent the last couple of days on their property. So looking forward to chatting with them next week. But Herb, to you especially, mate, great chatting again, and look forward to catching up on our next adventure. And until then,
thank you for having me.
See you, Herb.
Bye.